texture rather like chocolate, they are cut into terraces by the different levels of the water, while the lapping of the waves is perpetually undermining them, so that huge slabs of the rich alluvial mud are continually falling away into the river. Each of these terraces, as it emerges from the receding water, is planted with beans or melons by the thrifty farmer, while the sandbanks forming in the river will presently also be under cultivation, the natives claiming them while still covered with water, their claims being staked by Indian corn stalks or palm branches. Like the canal banks in the Delta, the Nile banks form the great highway for Upper Egypt, and at all times of the day one may see the people and their animals silhouetted against the sky as they pass to and fro between their villages. In the neighborhood of large towns, or such villages as hold a weekly market, the banks are very animated, and for many miles are thronged with people from the surrounding district, some walking, others riding on camels, donkeys, or buffaloes, pressing towards the market to enjoy the show, or sell the many articles of produce with which they are laden. At the water's edge, herds of buffalo wallow in the river, tended by a little boy who stares stolidly at your steamer as it passes, or in great excitement chases your vessel and vainly cries for bakshish. At frequent intervals are the water wheels and shadoofs, which raise the water to the level of the fields, and these are such important adjuncts of the farm that I must describe them. The shadoof is one of the oldest and one of the simplest methods of raising water in existence. A long pole is balanced on a short beam supported by two columns of mud, about 4 or 5 feet high, erected at the end of the water channel to be supplied. 6 feet or more below it is a pool or basin cut into the river bank, and which is kept supplied with water by a little channel from the river. One end of the pole is weighted by a big lump of mud, from the other a leather bucket is suspended by means of rope or straw, or a second and lighter pole. In order to raise the water, the shadoof worker, bending his weight upon the rope, lowers the bucket into the basin below, which, when filled, is easily raised by the balancing weight, and is emptied into the channel above. As the river falls, the basin can no longer be fed by the river, so a second shadoof is erected in order to keep the first supplied, and in low Nile it is quite a common sight to see 4 of these shadoofs, one above the other, employed in raising the water from the river level to the high bank above. This work is, perhaps, the most arduous of any farm labor, and the workers are almost entirely naked as they toil in the sun, while a screen of cornstalks is often placed to protect them from the cold north wind. The water wheels, or sakia as they are called, are of 2 kinds, both ingenious. Each consists of a large wheel placed horizontally, which is turned by 1 or more bullocks. The spokes of this wheel project as cogs, so as to turn another wheel placed below it at right angles. When used in the fields, the rim of this second wheel is hollow and divided into segments, each with a mouth or opening. As the wheel revolves, its lower rim is submerged in the well, filling its segments with water, which, as they reach the top, empty their contents sideways into a trough, which carries the water to the little genina or watercourse, which supplies the fields. Those used on the river bank, however, are too far from the water for such a wheel to be of use, so in place of the hollow rim the second wheel also has cogs, on which revolves an endless chain of rope, to which earthen pots are attached, and whose length may be altered to suit the varying levels of the river. Some of these sakias are very pretty, as they are nearly always shaded by trees of some kind as a protection to the oxen who work them. One of the prettiest incidents of all, however, is the village watering place, where morning and evening the women and children of the town congregate to fill their water pots, wash their clothing or utensils, and enjoy a chat. It is pretty to watch them as they come and go, often desperately poor. They wear their ragged, dust-soiled clothing with a queenly grace, for their lifelong habit of carrying their burdens upon their heads, and their freedom from confining garments, have given them a carriage which women in this country might well envy. Though generally dark-skinned and toil-worn, many of the younger women are beautiful, while all have shapely and delicately formed limbs, and eyes and teeth of great beauty. At the water's edge the children are engaged in scrubbing cooking pots and other utensils, while their elders are employed in washing their clothing or domestic linen, when, after perhaps enjoying a bath themselves, their water pots are filled, and struggling up the steep bank, they disappear towards the village. These water pots, by the way, are two-handled, and pretty in shape, and are always slightly conical at the base, so that they are able to stand on the shelving river banks without falling, and for the same reason are nearly always carried slightly sideways on the head. It is pretty to see the wonderful sense of balance these girls display in carrying their water pots, which they seldom touch with their hand, and it is surprising also what great weights even young girls are able to support, for a balass filled with water is often a load too heavy for her to raise to her head without the assistance of another. Like all the poor, they are always obliging to each other, and I recently witnessed a pathetic sight at one of these village watering places, when an old woman, too infirm to carry her balass herself, was with difficulty struggling down the bank and leading a blind man, who bore her burden for her. Chapter 6